coming out of corporate America, I knew the things I like to do. I knew the things that I was good at, and decided, hey, I'm gonna come out of this and I'm gonna start this business on my own. Then all of a sudden, I end up in this position as a business coach, where I'm looking to work with business owners, and I have thought in my mind of I don't know how to run a successful business. I'm not a business owner.
Your opinion of a successful business owner, what that is, might be different than mine.
All right, this is episode 1 of the Business Brains and BS podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome, and our podcast is really focused on helping people who are business owners in most cases grow their business, become better at what they do, but also deal with that 6 inches of real estate between their ears that tends to get in the way. And along the way, we're going to have a little bit of fun as well. So as I said, today we're talking about imposter syndrome, which is not anything that's new. This has been around for a long time, and it tends to be something that high performers experience. So speaking of high performers, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Greg Suttmiller from Evolution Mental Health. Greg, how are we doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh man, I'm living the dream, man. So imposter syndrome. I imagine as a licensed professional counselor, you've probably dealt with some business owners who have experienced imposter syndrome from time to time.
Sure. Yeah. And yeah, they're all external. I've never experienced it internally, right? Just helping other people.
Right. Yeah. Me either. Yeah. So yeah, it's funny. Greg and I were actually talking about putting this episode together. And I said to him, why are we doing this? Is anybody even going to listen to this? So at least hopefully our moms will listen to it if nobody else, right?
My mom's not a business owner. Is yours?
No, but I think she loves me enough to suffer through 30 minutes of us talking. So imposter syndrome. So as a business owner, and I guess I can maybe share a little bit of what I experienced, coming out of corporate America. I knew the things I like to do. I knew the things that I was good at, and decided, hey, I'm gonna come out of this and I'm gonna start this business on my own. And I did buy a franchise, which I think was really helpful. But then all of a sudden, I end up in this position as a business coach, where I'm looking to work with business owners, and I have, I have this thought in my mind of I don't know how to run a successful business. I'm not a business owner, which actually isn't true, because I do own another small business. But I got in my own head, and I really started focusing on the negatives. And why would anybody want to listen to me? So when you're dealing with somebody who's working through something like that, Greg, what are some of the things that you have them do? How do you have them kind of work through that?
Well, first, you're talking about imposter syndrome. What are you impostering? Like, what are you trying to be? So it's got to start with defining that. Like, what is a successful whatever, from your point of view? Because your opinion of a successful business owner, what that is, might be different than mine, So I think that's where we have to start is, what does success look like to you? Or what do you think you should be as a business owner, So we have, something to shoot at.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, because I think social media probably does not help us when we're dealing with imposter syndrome, right? Because everybody's trying to put this positive face out there about how great they are. And I remember when I first started trying to do some social media advertising or videos, put some things out there to help business owners. I thought, is anybody ever gonna watch this? What do I have to offer? And am I going to be shining a light on myself and all of my all of my insecurities? And are they going to figure out how I'm really not good at this and faking it till I make it? Right? We got that fake it till you make it culture. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think social media is crazy, and it has a lot of positives. Like, why are you using it? You're probably using it because you can reach a lot of people with it. These days we can accomplish way more in terms of reach online than we ever could in person. I mean, you and I decided to do this podcast in part because we can, hit more people talking on a podcast that's going to be posted online than we could trying to do some kind of circuit, educating people in person and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of benefit to social media in that regard. But it also, the way I think about it, it's not the real world. The people on it are real people. Well, I say that. I mean, some of them are robots, I guess. But, generally speaking, the people we're talking about are real people. Um, but you don't get a full view of who someone really is on social media. You don't get a full view of their strengths or their struggles. So, there's pros and cons to social media, but to how it affects or interacts with like imposter syndrome. Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you're online and you see somebody that seems like a resounding success, it's easy to look at that and think, well, I'm not that. I mean, we picked this topic because this is our first podcast episode. We both listened to other podcasts, you know. Um, yeah, if I sit here and pretend like, I'm one of these, top 10 podcast people, that's definitely faking it, you know. Um, so yeah, so what we find online can definitely fuel that imposter syndrome. But also, you can flip that around. You can reframe that to, well, hey, these people are just projecting a certain thing. Well, I can project something. Not trying to say like we're fake people. We're not. I mean, I've known you for a few years now. I know you're not a fake person. Hopefully, you don't think I'm a fake person. But we can try to put our best foot forward online, and put something out there that is useful. And that is what it boils down to is, is it actually helpful? There are things we can measure. So you talk about fake it to make it. Um, if we get a good definition of what success is, I mean, if I come to you as a business coach, and I know this from experience, if I come to you and I say, I want to be successful, we're going to define some goals we're going to shoot towards, and you're going to make me be specific. You're going to make me give you actual numbers, actual time frames, things like that. That tells us whether or not we're successful. You know, I set this revenue goal or this profit goal, or I, set this goal for expansion or different things like that. Well, how close did I come to hitting those goals? That lets me know how well I'm doing. And that's not fake at all. Those are real concrete numbers.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And I think, something that you just said too, made me think about, what we focus on tends to be what we get, right? It's kind of that law of attraction type of thing, where if I'm constantly focusing on my insecurities or the things that I think are my insecurities, um, those tend to become self-fulfilling, and it also tends to fuel that line of thinking, right? And I remember I've got a really good friend, Tracy Duez. She and I were working together for quite a while. And one of the things that she had me go through when I was dealing with some imposter syndrome issues was a backward bucket list. And it was basically to sit down and write down all of the things that I had done in my life that I was proud of, right? Everything from my time in the army, awards, time with Pfizer, awards that I'd won, trips that I'd won, getting married, having children, all of these things that I'd graduated in college, whatever it might be, and then strip away the name, right, and look at it through the lens of if you were being introduced to this person for the first time and all you had was this list of accolades, would you be impressed with that person and what they'd accomplished or not? And I think that that's a really, really good exercise to do, to say, you know what? Hey, I have accomplished things. And when I was going through these things to accomplish them, I didn't always know what I was doing then, right? It was a learning process. It was an opportunity for me to expand and evolve and grow. And that's what has made me better and better at what I do. So embracing the imposter syndrome and kind of flipping it around and saying, I really think, um, I don't know that this is going to sound mean. I don't know that dumb people get imposter syndrome, right? Because they just kind of go through life with this, dumb person confidence of I can do it, right? I think it's the more intelligent, more self-aware people who are recognizing that, yes, this is a challenge. I'm trying to push through this and I'm having these feelings of inadequacy as a result. So I think that imposter syndrome in some ways is a sign of self-awareness.
Yeah, I think you could say that. I think, you said dumb people. I don't know if I'd say dumb per se. I have one person that comes to mind. Um, this therapist I worked with years ago who was not a dumb person in terms of like IQ, you know. Um, she was, a brand new therapist. And the way the process works, if you want to become a licensed therapist, is you get a master's degree, and then you have to go through a period where you're practicing, but under the supervision of a more experienced therapist. And that's where she was at. You know, she was in that early process. Um, and she decided the moment she got her license, the moment she got out from under that supervision period, she was going to start her own practice. Now, bear in mind, this would have been like 2015, probably. It's like 10 years ago. And bear in mind, we're talking about Tulsa, Oklahoma, because I'm going to throw out some numbers here. So kind of put it in context. Um, as soon as she gets her license, she tells me, I'm going to open up my own practice. It's going to be cash only, $200 an hour, and off to the stars, you know. Now, at that time in Tulsa, Oklahoma, you couldn't really find anybody in town charging more than probably $100 an hour for therapy. So she's going to charge double that. She's not going to take insurance or anything. So she's confident there's going to be a high demand, you know, to see her for that price. And I remember listening and thinking, you are so delusional if you think that's going to work. Um, Not only is that, you know, not kind of the market value, but you're brand new. You have no reputation in this field. No one knows who you are. Um, but I wouldn't say she was a dumb person. I say she was a very confident person. Um,
Yeah.
uh, but not dumb in terms of like IQ, you know. I think she was actually a pretty intelligent person. So I don't know if that's sometimes maybe ignorance of how the world works, you know, being like young and kind of inexperienced, um, or just, you know, somebody who never had much adversity in life. Yeah, I think there are different factors that go into it, you know, but yeah, I mean,
How'd she end up doing?
it was a struggle at first, and I think she had to adjust some things. I pretty sure she had to take up a part-time job on the side for a while, and but I think over time, eventually things kind of worked out. But you know, she had to adjust. You know, that's, you know, you live and learn. Um, so, and again, that's in part because she wasn't a dumb person. You know, she just had I think, a bad idea of how this was going to work. Uh, Yeah,
Yeah, maybe I should have used the words less emotionally intelligent or less self-aware people probably don't experience imposter syndrome. You know, and you talk about her in that situation, and I think sometimes, you know, you get some hits right along the way, and they knock you off your path, and that can really impact imposter syndromes too, right? It's like it seems like you're cruising along just fine, and then all of a sudden you have a tire blow on the journey, and it's like, okay, great, now look at where I am, I'm stuck. And again, it's that focus kind of on that downward spiral of the negative things. And you know, we talk a lot about the concept of perturbation, you know, in Action Coach, and concept of perturbation is really the pressure that gets put on you as you're going through change, right? It's like a lump of coal turning into a diamond, and it needs that pressure in order for that to happen. And when you know, when we're going through situations like this, when we're going through imposter syndrome, being able to stop and focus on, okay, what's on the other end of this? Am I gonna quit? Am I gonna give up? And then that's going to, number one, it's going to lead to failure. Number two, it's going to reinforce that you know, feeling of being an imposter, right? So it's again that self-fulfilling prophecy. Or am I going to push through this? Am I going to use this as a learning opportunity? Am I going to lean into it? And you know, I think something else too on this too is getting help, having a conversation. You know, just sitting down and talking to somebody, a mentor, a peer, a counselor, a coach, somebody about it to help you, you know, flip the script and look at it through a different lens and realize, you know what, hey, you may not know everything about this, but you certainly can move forward if you, as you said, you know, put a plan together. Where is it that you feel that you have these inadequacies, and then what can you do about it, right? We've got a joke at Action Coach that there's a reason we're called Action Coach, not Think About It Coach, right? Because action tends to help with pretty much any problem that you have out there. And I think sometimes with imposter syndrome, we do get stuck in that paralysis by analysis because we think it has to be so perfect, right? That you know, if I put a product out there that's flawed, then people are going to see through me and see that I'm not really as good as I want them to think that I am.
yeah. Well, you have to practice too. I mean, that, something kind of a joke in my field is like, that's what we call it. Like I have a therapy practice.
Right.
I will never show up to work one day and call it, my like therapy perfection, because you're always learning and growing and getting better, so that is definitely part of it. So that's the action piece, you have to start doing and then learn as you go, which is really odd. I remember thinking about that when I first started out, thinking like, man, like if I screw up at this job, like I could kind of mess somebody up, you know? And
Yeah, no pressure.
And I remember early in my like, the very first job I ever had as a counselor, early on, I kinda pushed this particular client I was working with in a way that I think definitely contributed to him relapsing. He had a drug problem, and in the moment, I thought I was doing something helpful, and then after finding out he had relapsed and talking that through with him, man, I felt terrible. I was like, "I think I'm partly to blame here." I mean, I didn't make him go out and get drugs and use drugs, but I think the way I kinda pushed him contributed to that, pushed him more than he was ready at that moment, And, that was like a real eye opener to me. Like, man, like, yes, you have to practice to get better, but you better be really mindful and really try to sharpen your skills quickly, Um, so action, yes, but always learning, always growing, always being intentional.
Yeah. When I was in the Army, my best friend and I, we were Patriot missile officers, and we would have evaluations. We'd have certifications that we'd have to go through. And he trained me, and we had this saying. It was confident and cocky, but not too confident and not too cocky. And I think that there's something to that, right? Because the more you learn, the more action to take. The more action you take, the more you grow. That increases your confidence. But you can have confidence without having complete competence, right? Because confidence is, at least kind of in the context that we're talking about, it's I'm going to get there, right? We've got a kind of a saying in action that you just need to be one step ahead of your client, right? I don't have to be 10 miles ahead. I just need to be thinking about what's the next thing, what's the next thing that's going to help them move forward, help them build that business that they want, help them stop working in it as much as they are. And it all comes back to, taking action, working on myself and recognizing those thoughts that are going through my head and then saying, okay, is this really how I want to see myself? Is this really what I want to portray? Or can I flip that script and then do the work like we're talking about in order to get better, right? But I think I'd be willing to bet that anybody you looked at who you would say is successful, whatever your definition of it is, they would probably, if they were being honest, say, yeah, I've had imposter syndrome at least one point in my life or my career.
So I have a question for you. How much do you think like age and maturity factor into this sort of thing? Because I think about myself, and when I decided to start my own business, um, I was 39 and I'd spent the last 6 years in management roles. And so I had not been a business owner, but I had worked closely with business owners and seen a lot of the behind the scenes. I knew enough to know I know something about running a business, but also knew that I didn't know everything because I would see the owners doing things that I'd never done. And then I was smart enough to know there's probably things that they do that I never see, you know? Um, so like I said, that was 39 with some experience. I think if I had gone into business for myself at 25, it would have been a different thing. If I'm being honest, I think I would have been a lot more cocky and would have had to learn some hard lessons. So how much do you think that factors in, the age and maturity thing?
I think that's a really interesting question, and it's funny because I've thought about that too. If I had started this coaching business when I was 35 instead of when I was 49, I think exactly the same. I've probably been a lot more cocky, which I think would have worked for me in some ways, because I think the cocky kind of pulls away from the imposter syndrome. I think the big thing is that it's not so much the age. I think it's the experience with the task, right? So if you think about going into, I may have been really, really good at geometry, but not great at not great at, algebra 2 in high school. So, I may have told myself, I'm an imposter here saying that I'm good at math. So I really think it probably has more because if we look at you as a counselor, right, at the point that you split off and started your own business, if you had just continued to go on as a counselor, you would have continued to build on that wealth of knowledge that you have, that experience, and you would have felt, you would have had that confidence, right? You wouldn't have necessarily had probably that imposter syndrome unless you got hit out of left field with somebody who you're like, whoa, I don't know what to do with this. Um, but I think when you look at now the new situation, okay, now I am doing this thing that I'm good at, but I'm adding this whole other layer of owning my own business, and that's where the imposter syndrome I think starts to creep in. So I think a lot of times imposter syndrome comes in when it's a new task or situation more than anything else, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense. We both talked about this and talked about our age and how that was a factor. Um, so I work with counselors who own their own practices and try to help them out. And, I talked to someone recently who had a lot of experience as a counselor, no managerial experience. And we got in a conversation about billing. And I said something about having experience with billing. And she's like, "No, yeah, yeah, I've got lots of, billing experience." And when she starts talking about it, I realized she means she has experience seeing a client and billing for the service. Whereas when I was talking about it, I meant I have experience dealing with payer sources, dealing with denied claims, making sure prior authorizations are going through, all that stuff to make sure that when you submit the claim, it gets paid, you know? So we both use the same terminology, but came at it from a different perspective. But she sounded very confident, and I just, I had the thought of like, "Oh, lady, you got a lot to learn here." But that's okay. We'll work on it. We'll work on it together. Um, so there's that. Like, I mentioned in my own little story that it really helped being in like an upper management role and seeing some of what the owner of the business did, so that I could realize, oh my goodness, there's so much that goes into running this place that I'd never thought of. Whereas if you're just in my business, if you're the therapist, um, there's just so much of that you don't see, and so that could factor in too. Just lack of knowledge could feed into that confidence, and then make you feel like less of an imposter. That like, oh, I've got this.
It's as I'm sitting here kind of thinking through my experience, my career. I went from college into the army, from the army to work for Pfizer, right? So my dad was in the military, so I was always here's the expectation, here's what you do, here's how you do it guy, right? So when I was in corporate America, whether it was as a sales rep, as a sales manager, there was always somebody I reported to, and there was always direction that was being given, right? And I think that's another thing that could tie into imposter syndrome too is, stepping out on your own as a business owner, or even if you're not a business owner and you're moving into a new role within your organization. Again, it's these new tasks, these new experiences that you're expected to master and know, and there are other people depending on you to achieve those, right? And then you take away that top level, that kind of reporting responsibility or that mentoring relationship. And that I think can really impact imposter syndrome too, right? Because I remember thinking that after I stepped away from corporate America, I was like, oh crap, it's just me. I can lay here in bed until 2 o'clock. And other than my wife saying, are you feeling okay? Nobody's going to know if I got out and went out and talked to business owners and asked them, hey, do you have the business that you thought you were going to have when you started it? Would you like to talk about how, you can get there? If I didn't get up and go out and tell people what I did, Tracy always said, uh, meet people, tell them what you do and make them an offer. Right. And it's like, okay, but how do I do that? What if they don't think that what if I'm bothering them? What if, right? And I think that ties back to that imposter syndrome, right? What if they look at me and go, this guy's a joke. Why is he coming walking into my business? I'm a business owner. I know everything. And I can promise you this, there's no business owner out there that knows everything.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes that's failure can be helpful in that regard. I mean, that's how you and I met. I hadn't failed in the sense of like I'd gone out of business or gone bankrupt, but things weren't where I wanted them to be. And I thought, okay, a little extra help here uh, might be good, you know? And to your credit, you did a good job of engaging me and, you know, helping me see what I was missing. And, um, you know, whereas, yeah, if you'd been in bed, that wouldn't have happened. So,
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to that taking action thing, right? So, I think part of imposter syndrome is, I think first you gotta name it, figure out what is it that is causing this, and then flip the script and think about I was just listening to, another podcast, and it was a, interview with, Mike Logier, I think, he's the author of, The Art of or the, Law of Attraction, and he was talking about making a list of, the things that you don't want, and then making a list of the things that you do want, and being able to look at, okay, what is it I don't want? And he was talking about when you go to a restaurant and you're not sure what you want to eat, usually you go through and you start taking things. I don't want to eat that. I don't like fish. I don't want to eat that because it has, coconut in it. I don't want to eat that because it's too many calories. So it's kind of a process of elimination to get to where you want to go. And I think that's a big part of imposter syndrome too, is to be able to say, okay, I'm focusing on this negative. I'm focusing on this part of me that I don't think is good enough or I don't think exists. So instead of focusing on that, saying, okay, how do I flip that script and say, okay, I want to get better at this, right? If I want to get better at helping my clients understand disc profiles, well, there is so much information out there, right? I just bought a book the other day that I'm looking forward to reading. It's called Surrounded by Idiots, and it's about disc, because then I'll be able to take what I've learned, bolster my confidence in talking about, personality profiles, but then also bring more value. And I think that's a big part of imposter syndrome too, is when you can flip that script and start to bring more value to people, then that's going to increase your confidence, right? Because you're going to get that feedback loop. And I think that's probably another thing that's really important with imposter syndrome is, and we mentioned this a little bit earlier, is to have that feedback loop, is to get those mentors, those coaches, those therapists, those whoever it is, your spouse, right? And kids a lot of times can be a great feedback loop for you as to how you are as a parent, right? Sorry, kids, there are a lot of things I probably owe you an apology for, but
yeah, absolutely. What you're talking about reminds me of something like a tool I use in therapy sessions all the time. We talk about core beliefs. Like we have all these thoughts that run through our mind minute to minute to minute, but those thoughts are influenced by these core beliefs that we have. So for instance, like if I have a core belief that people are generally good and trustworthy and looking out for each other, then if I break down on the side of the road and I'm outside trying to fix my car or figure something out and someone pulls up behind me, I'm going to be happy. Like, yay, someone's here to help me. If I have a core belief that people are not to be trusted, that, people are out to get you, then when the car pulls up behind me, I'm going to be scared. It's the same situation, but it's that core belief I have that drives that. And so those core beliefs a lot of times hold us back. And, imposter syndrome, I think, kind of ties into some of those. And one exercise you can do to work on changing those core beliefs is, just call it looking at evidence, going back to what we talked about before. What evidence is there? When I say evidence, it's like we talk about, it's like, what's tangible, what's measurable, what's objective, real stuff. What evidence can you point to that supports this core belief you're trying to adopt? The one that feels like a fake at the moment, what evidence can you point to in your life? Kind of like you said, your mentor had you do with, the things you had accomplished in your life. And then the flip side of that is when you run across evidence that you think goes the other direction, that supports that you are an imposter, find a way to reframe it. Instead of looking at it as a failure, maybe you look at it as a learning opportunity, instead of saying, man, I completely blew it. I had this goal that I didn't hit. Say, okay, I didn't hit my goal, but I learned this, and this, and that's going to make me more equipped to handle my goal for the next quarter or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, and I think documenting it is a good way to do it, right? Because if we sit down and we put it on paper, it's amazing. Journaling, documenting, whatever you want to call it. It's amazing how it will help you work through it, right? And I think, at least for me, I found, especially like if I wake up in the middle of the night and there's something going on, I'm dealing with some imposter syndrome or something like that. I'll go and I'll just get up and go sit down and start writing about it. And I'll just get everything out of my brain. And then I'm able to go back and look at that and say, okay, well, that's one of the dumbest things I think I've ever read, just kind of seeing it from that outside perspective. But I think the other thing too is, and I think this is probably part of how the brain works, but I would say you're the expert on that. So correct me if I'm wrong. But getting it out and putting it on paper for me, I think, is my brain then says, okay, that's documented somewhere. I don't need to focus on that anymore. I know that it's someplace that I can go access it if I need it.
Oh, absolutely. I encourage people to journal all the time. Just getting it out of your head on paper, a lot of times you experience some relief, but then also you can read back through it. Like how you said, you read it and think, well, that's dumb. You can read back through it and it hits different. You're like, oh, I didn't realize I was thinking that way, or, oh my goodness, that's not accurate, you know? So yeah, I think just writing your thoughts and then reading back over them is a very helpful exercise.
Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us for the inaugural episode of the Business Brains and BS podcast. We certainly appreciate you joining us. We hope that you got some value out of it. And if you did, and you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, please make sure that you follow this podcast. And if you see some value in it and you think other people might enjoy it too, we'd love a rating. Thanks so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.